The Emperor of Mankind. Prologue. The greatest mystery in Warhammer. Before there was an Imperium, before there were Primarchs, before Space Marines marched beneath the Aquila, there was only one man. The history of humanity is written in blood. Every empire that has ever risen has believed itself eternal. Every king has claimed destiny. Every civilization has looked upon its own achievements and declared itself the pinnacle of history. Yet all of them eventually fall. In the grim darkness of the far future, humanity has forgotten almost everything about its own beginnings. Entire millennia have vanished beneath war, censorship, superstition, and the relentless passage of time. The Imperium of Man governs over 1 million worlds, but it scarcely remembers the world where it all began. Terra, ancient Earth, the cradle of mankind. To the citizens of the Imperium, the Emperor of Mankind is no longer a man at all. He is the master of mankind, the Lord of the Imperium, the Divine Emperor, the light that guides every void ship through the nightmare of the warp, a god to untold trillions. His name is spoken in whispered prayers before battle. His image adorns cathedrals that scrape the heavens. His sacrifice sustains humanity itself. Yet, for all the devotion shown to him, almost no one truly knows who he was. Where did he come from? Was he born an ordinary child? Was he created by powers beyond mortal comprehension? Or has the truth been buried beneath 10,000 years of myth and propaganda? These questions have haunted scholars, remembrancers, inquisitors, and fans of Warhammer for decades. And perhaps the most fascinating answer is this: no one knows. Not because the records were destroyed, not because there were no witnesses, but because the mystery itself is intentional. Throughout the history of Warhammer, fragments of the Emperor's past have emerged like broken relics, excavated from forgotten ruins. Some accounts contradict one another, others were written centuries apart, each reflecting a different understanding of who or what the Emperor truly is. Some stories describe him as the combined soul of thousands of ancient shamans who sacrificed themselves to save humanity. Others tell us he was simply born in a settlement in prehistoric Anatolia, possessing unimaginable gifts from the moment he first opened his eyes. Neither version fully replaces the other. Instead, they exist side by side, separated by layers of myth, history, and uncertainty. The ambiguity is not a flaw in the lore. It is one of the greatest strengths, because history itself works much in the same way. Ask historians to recount events from 5,000 years ago, and they will argue over fragments of pottery, faded inscriptions, and contradictory accounts. Now imagine trying to reconstruct events that occurred nearly 50,000 years before the current age of the Imperium. Imagine piecing together the life of a man whose existence spans longer than recorded civilization itself. Imagine uncovering the truth after civilizations have risen, burned, collapsed, and vanished into dust. The Emperor has lived through it all. He watched the first cities rise beside ancient rivers. He witnessed bronze become iron. He saw philosophy given birth to empires. He watched science reshape civilization. He observed humanity reach unimaginable heights, only to plunge into darkness once more. For over 40,000 years he remained hidden, patient, watching, learning, and waiting. Some believe he was humanity's guardian from the very beginning. Others argue he waited far too long to intervene. Even amongst his closest allies, opinions differed. To some, he was the greatest visionary of our species. To others, he was a ruthless pragmatist willing to sacrifice billions for the survival of trillions. That contradiction lies at the very heart of the Emperor's character. He inspired absolute loyalty. He commanded impossible dreams. He united a shattered species beneath a single banner, yet many of his greatest victories carried a terrible cost. He preached reason while demanding and questioning obedience. He rejected religion only to become the greatest object of worship humanity has ever known. He sought to destroy superstition only for superstition to preserve his empire after he fell. This is the tragedy of the Emperor. Not merely that he failed, but that history transformed his every intention into something almost unrecognizable. The man who sought to free humanity from gods became one himself. The ruler who wished to end ignorance became surrounded by fanaticism. The architect of reason became imprisoned within myth. But before any of that could happen, before the Thunder Warriors, before the Primarchs, before the Great Crusade, before Horus betrayed his father, before the Golden Throne became humanity's final hope, there was another story, one almost forgotten, a story that begins not in towering hive cities, nor upon distant alien worlds, but on a world that will one day be called Holy Terra. A world without starships, without empires, without writing, a world where humanity was still young, where small tribes hunted across untamed landscapes beneath unfamiliar constellations, where the warp itself was quieter than it would ever be again. This is the beginning of that story, not the story of an empire, not the story of a god, but the story of a child who would one day become the most powerful human to have ever lived, a child whose decisions would shape 50,000 years of history, a child destined to carry the hopes of an entire species upon his shoulders. To understand the Emperor, we must travel further into humanity's past than any imperial archive can reliably remember. Beyond the age of strife, beyond the dark age of technology, beyond the birth of civilization itself, to a forgotten age when mankind stood at the dawn of history and destiny waited in silence. The Emperor of Mankind, Part 1. Before there was an Emperor. To understand the Emperor of Mankind, we must first understand the world that existed before him. Long before the Imperium, long before Terra became the throne of a million worlds, long before mankind looked toward the stars, there was only Earth. Not Holy Terra, not the cradle of an interstellar empire, simply Earth. A wild world of forests, mountains, rivers, deserts, and endless skies. Its people possessed no written language, no kingdoms stretching across continents, no armies clad in steel. Humanity was still young. Small tribes wandered vast landscapes, following migrating animals and changing seasons. They lived and died by the rhythms of nature. Every hunt carried danger. Every winter threatened starvation. Every unfamiliar sound beyond the campfire could mean death. To us, these people might seem primitive, but appearances can be deceiving. For although they lacked advanced technology, they possessed something that later generations would almost completely lose: a profound connection to the warp. Today, the warp is spoken of in fearful whispers. Imperial citizens know it as the Sea of Souls. Navigators steer through it. Astropaths communicate across it. Demons emerge from it. Chaos rules within it. It is a place of madness where time itself has little meaning, a realm capable of corrupting even the strongest mind. But it was not always so. In humanity's distant past, the warp was remarkably calm. Imagine a vast ocean before the coming of a hurricane. Its water still moved, its current still flowed. But beneath the surface there was peace rather than endless violence. And why? Because the warp is not simply another dimension. It is a mirror. Every thought, every emotion, every fear, and every hope. Every dream experienced by every sentient being leaves an imprint upon it. The warp reflects consciousness itself. In the distant prehistoric era, humanity's psychic footprint was still incredibly small. There was no galaxy-spanning civilizations, no unending wars consuming billions of lives, no hive worlds where unimaginable suffering echoed every second of every day. There was anger, there was love, there was also grief, but these emotions existed on a far smaller scale. The warp remained relatively tranquil because the galaxy had not yet become consumed by endless conflict. This balance allowed something extraordinary to flourish. Among early humans were individuals unlike any that would come after them. Men and women born with immense psychic potential, the first psychers. These gifted individuals would later become known, at least in the oldest surviving accounts, as the Shamans. To understand the Shamans, we must set aside the image of the modern Imperial Psyker. The Psykers of the 41st millennium are dangerous. Many require constant supervision. Without rigorous training, they risk possession, insanity, or catastrophic psychic accidents. Entire worlds have burned because one unstable mind lost control. The Shamans were different. Entirely different. They existed before the warp became poisoned by chaos. They could perceive currents invisible to ordinary people. They sensed the emotions of others. They experienced visions. They communicated through thoughts rather than words. Some could heal. Some could glimpse possible futures. Others became advisors to entire tribes simply because their wisdom seemed almost supernatural. But their greatest gift was not prophecy, nor healing, nor telepathy. It was immortality. Not immortality of the flesh. Even the Shamans grew old. Their bodies weakened. Eventually they died. Yet death was never truly the end. When a Shaman's body failed, their soul entered the warp. For ordinary humans, this journey was mysterious, but for the Shamans, it was familiar. They possessed such extraordinary mastery over their psychic essence that they could navigate the currents of the warp after death. Instead of dissolving into nothingness, instead of becoming prey, their souls simply found a new human child, a new life, a new beginning. Memories remained. Knowledge accumulated. Century after century, lifetime after lifetime. Imagine a teacher who never forgot a lesson, a philosopher who had personally witnessed 5,000 years of history, a healer who had practiced medicine across hundreds of incarnations. That was the true strength of the Shamans. Every generation inherited the wisdom of countless generations before. As thousands of years passed, these ancient psychers became humanity's hidden guardians. They did not rule kingdoms, they did not demand worship. Instead, they quietly guided civilization. A warning here, a lesson there. A wise leader encouraged, a tyrant subtly opposed. Their influence was almost invisible, and perhaps that was exactly how they intended it. Humanity needed to grow on its own. At first, the changes were almost impossible to notice, like a river gaining strength one drop at a time. But over thousands of years, those drops became floods. The calm sea the Shamans had known for countless lifetimes began to shift. The currents grew stronger, the tides became unpredictable. Something was awakening beyond mortal sight. The Shamans were among the first to recognize the danger. Something fundamental had changed within the Sea of Souls. Something ancient, something hungry, something that would one day plunge the galaxy into eternal war. They did not know its name yet, but they understood one terrifying truth: the warp was no longer safe, and for the first time in all their remembered history, even death itself had become something to fear. The guardians of humanity had protected mankind for thousands of years. Now, they faced an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered, an enemy that could not be fought with weapons, could not be reasoned with, and not be escaped. The age of peace within the warp was ending, and with it, the future of humanity hung by a thread. At first, the changes were almost impossible to notice, like a river gaining strength one drop at a time. But over thousands of years, those drops became floods. The calm sea the Shamans had known for countless lifetimes began to shift. The currents grew stronger, the tides became unpredictable. Something was awakening beyond mortal sight. The Shamans were among the first to recognize the danger. Something fundamental had changed within the Sea of Souls. Something ancient, something hungry, something that would one day plunge the galaxy into eternal war. They did not know its name yet, but they understood one terrifying truth: the warp was no longer safe, and for the first time in all their remembered history, even death itself had become something to fear. The guardians of humanity had protected mankind for thousands of years. Now, they faced an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered, an enemy that could not be fought with weapons, could not be reasoned with, and not be escaped. The age of peace within the warp was ending, and with it, the future of humanity hung by a thread. The birth of chaos. Every civilization leaves its mark upon history, but everything living leaves its mark upon something far older: the warp. For countless generations, the Shamans had believed they understood the Sea of Souls. It was mysterious, it was vast, it was beyond complete comprehension. But it was not hostile. Death was merely another journey, a transition from one life to the next. The soul would separate from the body, drift into the currents of the warp, and, through discipline and immense psychic mastery, find its way into a newly born child. Memories remained, wisdom accumulated, humanity's guardians endured through the ages, quietly shepherding civilization from the shadows. It was a cycle that had lasted for 1,000 years, a cycle so ancient that many of the Shamans believed it was simply the natural order of existence. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, that order began to unravel. At first, there were only small inconsistencies. A shaman who took longer than expected to return. Another who reported strange disturbances while crossing the Sea of Souls. Visions that no longer aligned. Dreams that felt wrong. No single event seemed alarming on its own, but together they formed a pattern. Something within the warp had begun to change. To understand why, we must first understand one of the most important truths in all of Warhammer. The warp is not merely a place, it is a reflection. It is shaped by the thoughts, emotions, and psychic echoes of every sentient being in the galaxy. Every act of compassion leaves an impression. Every moment of courage resonates across its tides. But so too does hatred. So too does fear. And so too does ambition, despair, jealousy, and rage. Unlike the material universe, where actions fade into history, emotions within the warp never truly disappear. They accumulate. They reinforce one another, like countless drops of rain feeding an ever-growing river. As humanity expanded, so too did its emotional footprint. Small villages became cities, cities became kingdoms, kingdoms became empires. With every conquest came bloodshed, with every revolution came suffering, with every betrayal became bitterness. The warp absorbed it all. Nor was humanity alone. Across the galaxy, countless alien civilizations experienced their own triumphs and tragedies. Each species added its own psychic resonance to the Sea of Souls. For millions of years, these echoed layered upon one another, invisible, silent. Growing stronger, the warp was becoming heavier, more turbulent. Its once gentle currents now churned with violent storms of emotion. The shamans sensed these changes long before anyone else. Meditation became more difficult, prophetic visions became clouded. The tranquil pathways they had traveled for countless lifetimes were beginning to disappear beneath tides they no longer recognized. Imagine sailing familiar waters for centuries, every current known, every star a guide, then one day, without warning, the sea itself changes. The landmarks vanish, the winds no longer obey reason, the waters begin to whisper. That was the reality facing humanity's oldest guardians. Still, they adapted, or so they believed. Until the first soul failed to return, one respected shaman passed peacefully, as many had before. His body was buried according to an ancient custom. His companions waited for his inevitable reincarnation. Months passed, then years. Nothing. Another shaman died. She too vanished. Then another, and another. Panic spread quietly amongst their hidden order. This had never happened. Not once in thousands upon thousands of years. At first they searched for mundane explanations. Perhaps they reincarnated further away than expected. Perhaps the ritual had been performed incorrectly. Perhaps the disturbances within the warp had merely delayed the process. But eventually, one soul returned. Only briefly, fragments of consciousness, a desperate psychic scream, a warning that echoed through every surviving shaman. There was something in the warp, something hunting. The soul had not become lost. It had been pursued. The message was incomplete and broken, filled with terror unlike anything the shamans had ever experienced. Then silence. The soul disappeared forever. For the first time since humanity's earliest days, one of its immortal guardians had truly died. What the shamans did not yet understand was that the warp itself was changing into something entirely new. Emotions that had once drifted harmlessly through its tides were beginning to gather together. Hatred attracted hatred. Violence drew more violence. Ambition fed ambition. Fear strengthened fear. The warp had become a place where familiar emotions resonated together, amplifying one another across unimaginable spans of time. These vast concentrations of psychic energy slowly developed awareness, not overnight, not in a single cataclysm, but across millions of years. What had once been formless echoes were becoming entities, hungry, intelligent, and immensely powerful. These were not yet the Chaos Gods, as they would later be known, but they were their beginnings. The first stirrings of vast intelligences born not from flesh, but from emotion itself. The shamans could sense them. They did not know their names. There was no Khorne, no Tzeentch, no Nurgle, no Slaanesh, not yet. Instead, there was only an overwhelming awareness that something ancient had awakened beneath the tides of the Sea of Souls, something that viewed mortal souls not as sacred, but as food. The realization shattered everything the shamans believed. Reincarnation had not failed because their powers were weakening. It had failed because the journey itself had become lethal. Every death now carried unimaginable risk. Every passage through the warp became a gamble against predatory forces growing stronger with every passing century. Humanity's oldest protectors had unknowingly entered a war they could not win, and the cruelest truth was this: the enemy was growing stronger because humanity itself was feeding it. Every murder, every betrayal, every war, every act of cruelty strengthened the darkness waiting beyond reality. Without intending to, mankind had begun creating the very forces that will one day seek its destruction. The Shamans gathered in secret, not as rivals, not as tribal elders, but as the surviving guardians of an entire species. Some argued that humanity must abandon civilization and return to the simpler lives. Others believed they should openly reveal themselves and lead mankind directly. A few proposed their psychic gifts to wage war with the warp itself. Every idea ended the same way: failure. There were too few of them, and each passing generation reduced their numbers still further. For every shaman who died, another vanished forever. Their order was bleeding to death, slowly, irreversibly. The guardians of humanity stood upon the edge of extinction. If they disappeared, who would protect mankind from what was coming? And who would stand against the darkness gathering beyond the veil? The answer, they realized with growing horror, was no one. Unless they did something unprecedented, something no shaman had ever attempted, something that would demand the greatest sacrifice in human history. The solution they envisioned was impossible. It was terrifying. And yet it would require every one of them to surrender the very immortality they had spent thousands of years preserving. Their lives had always been devoted to safeguarding humanity. Now, they would have to give those lives willingly. Not one at a time, but all together. The fate of mankind would rest upon a single, desperate gamble. A gamble whose consequences would echo across 50,000 years of history. The birth of the Emperor of Mankind had not yet come, but for the first time, the idea of the Emperor had been conceived. The Great Sacrifice. There are moments in history when an entire civilization turns upon the choice of a single generation. This was one of those moments. The surviving shamans had reached a terrible conclusion. There would be no victory, no miraculous discovery, no hidden sanctuary within the warp where they could escape darkness beyond reality. For thousands of years they had guided humanity with patience and wisdom. Now for the first time they admitted a truth almost impossible to accept. They were losing, not to an army, not to a rival civilization, but to the changing nature of existence itself. Every death reduced their numbers, every soul took with it thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. Every generation left fewer guardians standing watch over mankind. The extinction of the shamans was no longer a possibility, it was a certainty. Unless they changed the rules, so they gathered, not in one kingdom, not beneath the banner of one tribe, but from every corner of the ancient world. Wise men, wise women, mystics, healers, and prophets. Individuals who had lived hundreds of lives and remembered civilizations that no longer existed. Some had walked beside humanity since the first permanent settlements. Others remembered an Earth before farming, before cities, before written language. Each carried lifetimes of memory. Each understood the cost of failure. For perhaps the first time in history, every surviving guardian of mankind stood together. And they asked a single question: if we cannot save ourselves, can we save humanity? The debate is said to have lasted days. Some believed the answer lay in open leadership, reveal themselves, rule openly, guide civilization directly. Others rejected the idea. Humanity had always been strongest when allowed to choose its own path. To dominate mankind would only replace one weakness with another. Some proposed searching deeper into the warp. Others argued for abandoning civilization altogether. Every possibility ended at the same unavoidable truth: time had run out. The darkness within the Sea of Souls grew stronger with every passing generation. Eventually, one voice offered a solution unlike any before it. If individual souls can no longer survive the journey through the warp, then perhaps they should not travel alone. Instead of thousands of separate spirits attempting reincarnation, What if they became one soul? One consciousness, one being powerful enough to survive where none of them could. The idea was astonishing. No one had ever attempted anything remotely comparable. It was either supreme wisdom or unimaginable madness. Yet the more they considered it, the more inevitable it seemed. Each shaman possessed extraordinary psychic power. Alone they were vulnerable. Together, they might become something entirely new. Not merely stronger, but transformed, a guardian unlike anything humanity had ever known. One immortal soul carrying the knowledge, memories, wisdom, and purpose of them all. The proposal carried one final condition. It could never be reversed. Every participant would surrender their individual existence forever. No reincarnation, no second chance, no return. Everything they had been across of 1,000 lifetimes would vanish into single consciousness. Their identities, their memories, their very souls would cease to belong to them. This was not simply death. It was the willing end of self. There would be no monuments, no songs, no names remembered. History would only ever know their sacrifice, only the being born from it. And so they agreed. According to the oldest version of the legend, the ritual took place in absolute secrecy. No kings witnessed it, no civilizations recorded it, no armies marched, no temples rang with celebration, only silence. The greatest gathering of human psyches ever assembled, prepared for the final act of their existence. One by one they entered deep meditation, their minds reaching across the warp toward one another, thousands of souls becoming perfectly aligned. When the moment came, they ended their own lives, not out of despair, but hope. Their bodies perished together, yet their souls did not scatter, instead they converged. Imagine thousands of stars collapsing inward, separate lights becoming one impossible sun. The warp itself trembled. Countless lifetimes, millions of memories, thousands of years of experience merged into a single consciousness. Where there had once been many, now there was one. The soul emerged was unlike anything that had ever existed, immensely powerful, perfectly unified, immortal. A being capable of crossing the warp without fear, a soul too vast for the predators within the sea of souls to consume. Soon afterward, a child was born. To ordinary eyes he appeared completely human, but within him burned the combined essence of humanity's greatest guardians. This child would become the Emperor of mankind. For decades, this was accepted by many fans as the Emperor's definitive origin. It appeared in some of the earliest Warhammer publications and shaped how generations of readers understood his existence. It explained his vast psychic power, his ancient wisdom, his uncanny understanding of humanity, and his singular purpose to protect mankind at any cost. Yet Warhammer, like history itself, is rarely so straightforward. As the setting evolved, new stories emerged. The Horus Heresy novels introduced another perspective, one in which the Emperor was not explicitly described as the product of shaman sacrifice. Instead, he is portrayed as an extraordinarily ancient perpetual, an immortal human born in prehistoric Anatolia around the 8th millennium before the Common Era. He is still impossibly powerful, still older than recorded civilization, still humanity's greatest psychic being, but the exact source of those gifts is never fully explained. Notice the Games Workshop did. They did not publish a story saying the shaman tale was false, nor did they reaffirm it as an undeniable truth. Instead, they allowed uncertainty to remain. In the Imperium, story is fragmented. Records disappear, wars erase civilizations. Religious doctrine replaces historical fact. Why should the Emperor's own origin be any different? Perhaps the shaman's story is literal truth. Perhaps it became a symbolic legend passed down across countless ages. Perhaps only fragments remain, distorted by thousands of years of retelling. Or perhaps the Emperor himself allowed conflicting stories to survive. After all, a ruler who spent 40,000 years manipulating history would surely understand the power of mystery. What matters, whether one believes the ancient legend or the modern interpretation, is the purpose behind the story. Humanity needed a protector, whether forged through sacrifice or born through destiny. The result was the same. A single individual now walked the earth, possessing psychic abilities beyond anything humanity had ever witnessed. A child whose existence would alter the course of history forever. But despite the unimaginable power resting within him, he was still, at first, only a boy. He had parents, he had family, he knew love, he knew loss, and soon he would commit the first act that revealed to the world, if only to a handful of witnesses, that he was unlike any human who had ever lived. His journey as humanity's guardian had begun, not upon a battlefield, not upon a throne, but within a simple small village in ancient Anatolia, where a single murder would change history forever. Ancient Anatolia, the first life of the Emperor. Every legend begins with a child. If the oldest legends are true, the Emperor had already existed before he ever drew his first breath. The souls of humanity's greatest guardians had come and become one. Their purpose united, their sacrifice complete, but regardless of whether one accepts the ancient shaman account or more restrained modern interpretation, nearly every version of the lore agrees on one remarkable point. The Emperor's mortal life began on Terra, long before history, long before civilization. In the rugged lands of ancient Anatolia today, that region forms much of modern-day Turkey. 10,000 years before the birth of the Imperium, it was a world of scattered farming communities, stone dwellings, and small tribal settlements. There were no cities stretching across continents, no empires, no written laws, no great monuments, only families struggling against the hardships of an unforgiving world. This was the world into which the Emperor was born. He was not crowned at birth. No heavenly light announced his arrival. No prophet declared him mankind's savior. To those around him, he appeared to be an ordinary boy. He laughed, he learned. He explored the hills and rivers surrounding his village. He listened to stories told beside evening fires. He watched the changing seasons. He knew the warmth of family. He experienced the simple joys shared by every human child throughout history. And yet, there were signs, not dramatic miracles, not displays of overwhelming psychic force, but moments, small moments. He understood things he should not have understood. He noticed details others overlooked. He spoke with a wisdom that seemed strangely mature. The elders often found themselves pausing after conversations with a young boy, wondering how someone so young could ask questions that challenged their deepest beliefs. Some children learn quickly. This child seemed to remember, whether because of countless souls within him, as the ancient legend claims, or because an innate brilliance beyond human understanding, no one can truly say. But one thing became increasingly clear. He viewed the world differently. Where others isolated events, he saw patterns. Where others reacted with emotion, he saw and searched for causes. Where others accepted tradition, he questioned it. This relentless pursuit of understanding would define his entire existence, long before he sought to unite humanity. He sought to understand it. His father was a craftsman, a provider, a man he believed disputes should be settled through reason rather than violence. From him, the young emperor witnessed qualities that will remain central to his philosophy for a millennia. Discipline, responsibility, the belief that civilization depended upon order rather than chaos. His mother represented another lesson: compassion, patience, the quiet strength required to preserve a family through hardship for a brief time. The master of mankind knew something he would rarely experience again: peace. But peace never lasts forever. One evening, tragedy struck. The emperor's father did not return home. The village searched. Eventually, his body was found. At first glance, it appeared to be an unfortunate accident. Many accepted that explanation without question. Death was common in the ancient world.
hunting accidents, falls, wild animals, disease. Life was fragile. Few asked further questions, but the boy was not convinced. As preparations were made for his father's burial, he remained beside the body, silent and watching. According to the traditional account, it was then that something extraordinary occurred. When he touched his father's body, his psychic abilities awakened with startling clarity. Not merely as flashes of intuition, not simply emotion, but a vision. The past unfolded before his mind. He witnessed the final moments of his father's life. He saw the argument, he saw the betrayal, and he saw the killer. It was his own uncle. Driven by jealousy, consumed by resentment, a family dispute had become murder. For the first time in his life, the young emperor experienced humanity's darkest impulses firsthand. Not from strangers, not from enemies, but from someone bloodbound. The revelation shattered any innocent belief that evil belonged to only outsiders. It could only exist within families. With neighbors, with ordinary people, this lesson would never leave him. Many years later, when he spoke of humanity's flaws, he did so not as a philosopher, imagining abstract problems. He spoke as someone who had witnessed those flaws since childhood. The following day he sought out his uncle. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no demand for confession. The emperor simply stood before him. The older man saw only a grieving child. He underestimated him completely. The emperor looked into his uncle's eyes and understood everything. Not only the murder, but the fear, the guilt, the selfishness, the endless chain of choices that had led to that single act of violence. In that moment he faced his first true moral decision. Should justice be left to others? Should the murderer live? Should mercy outweigh accountability? There was no law to guide him, no court, no judge, only his conscience. Then he acted. Without raising a weapon, without speaking a curse, without touching his uncle, the emperor reached into the man's body with his mind. His psychic power, still young but already beyond human comprehension, stopped the beating of his heart. Instantly, silently, the murderer collapsed where he stood. No wound marked his body, no visible injury explained his death. To any observer, it would have appeared that his heart had simply failed. The emperor watched in silence. He did not celebrate, he did not smile, he did not feel triumph. He had delivered justice, but he had also taken a life. That burden would remain with him forever. Many readers interpret this story as a defining moment of the emperor's philosophy. He learned that evil often grows not from monsters but from ordinary people making selfish decisions. He learned that justice delayed can become justice and an injustice itself. But most importantly, he concluded that humanity required guidance. Without laws, without discipline, without strong leadership, people would inevitably surrender to greed, fear, ambition, and violence. It is impossible to know whether this single event alone shaped his worldview. A man who would live for tens of thousands of years cannot be explained by one childhood memory, yet symbols matter, stories matter, and this story, preserved across countless retellings, reveals something profound about the emperor's character. He was never motivated by revenge, he was motivated by order. Throughout the ages to come, he would make decisions that many considered ruthless. He would sacrifice millions to save billions. He would demand obedience over individual freedom. To some, those choices made him a tyrant. To others, a savior, willing to bear impossible burdens. Perhaps the seeds of both interpretations were planted here in a quiet village, beside a murdered father. As a child, discovered that justice and mercy are not always the same thing. The boy who had lived an ordinary life could no longer return to it. His understanding of humanity had changed forever, and so the child began to walk across continents, across civilizations, and across history itself. He would watch kingdoms rise from dust. He would witness empires collapse to ruin. He would stand beside kings without wearing a crown. He would shape the destiny of mankind from the shadows. For the next 40,000 years, the Emperor of Mankind would become history's invisible hand, and almost no one would ever know he was there. 40,000 years in the shadows. History remembers kings, it remembers conquerors, it remembers tyrants and prophets. But what if the greatest influence on human civilization never sought to be remembered at all? When the Emperor left his village in ancient Anatolia, he stepped into a world that was only beginning to awaken. Human civilization was still in its infancy. The first permanent settlements were spreading across fertile river valleys. Agriculture had transformed wandering tribes into communities. Trade connected distant peoples. Ideas began to travel farther than individuals ever could. For the first time in history, mankind was building something that might outlive a single generation. The Emperor watched it all. He did not see merely villages and fields. He saw the beginning of civilization itself. Unlike every other human being alive, he possessed one gift that would shape every decision he would ever make. Time meant almost nothing to him. Ordinary people measured their lives in decades. Kings dreamed of dynasties that might endure for centuries. The Emperor thought in millennia. A failed harvest was temporary. A collapsing kingdom was temporary. Even the fall of an empire was, to him, little more than a single chapter in humanity's much longer story. This perspective made him patient in many ways no mortal ruler could ever understand. He had no need to seize power quickly, no fear that age would rob him of opportunity. He could afford to wait. And so he watched. As centuries passed, humanity changed beyond recognition. Stone gave way to bronze, bronze yielded to iron. Simple villages became thriving cities surrounded by walls. Merchants crossed deserts and oceans in search of wealth. Scholars recorded knowledge that could survive the death of its creators. For the first time, history itself became something that could be preserved. The Emperor walked amongst these civilizations, never remaining in one place for too long. Sometimes he was a traveler, sometimes a healer, sometimes an advisor whose name would later be forgotten. Modern imperial scholars often speculate that the Emperor may have appeared throughout history under countless identities. Some legends claim he stood beside great rulers. Others insist he quietly guided philosophers, scientists, and visionaries. These stories remain speculation within the setting, and the Emperor himself never confirmed them. What matters is not the identity he may have worn, it is the pattern that emerges. Again and again, he seemed to encourage humanity towards knowledge rather than superstition, toward cooperation rather than endless division, toward progress rather than stagnation. He did not build monuments to himself, he built opportunities for others. It is tempting to ask why. If he possessed such imaginable power, why not simply declare himself ruler of Earth? Why allow wars, famines, and empires to rise and fall? The answer lies at the heart of the Emperor's philosophy. He believed that civilization imposed from above is fragile. People forced into enlightenment rarely remain enlightened. Knowledge must be earned. Progress must be chosen. A species that relies entirely upon one immortal guardian could never truly mature. Humanity had to learn. It had to stumble. It had to fail. Only through struggle could it become strong enough to survive the unimaginable future awaiting it. This belief would define every major decision the Emperor would later make. He did not seek worship. He sought capability. He did not wish humanity to depend on him forever. He wished mankind to become capable of standing without him. Ironically, history would ensure the opposite. As centuries became millennia, the Emperor observed the greatest strength and the greatest weakness of the human species, its adaptability. Humans, beings, learned faster than almost any other known race. They transformed environments, invented new tools, solved impossible problems. Every disaster became another lesson. Every setback inspired innovation. Again and again, humanity refused extinction. But alongside that brilliance came another pattern: division. Tribes became kingdoms. Kingdoms became empires. Empires fractured into civil war. New nations rose from the ruins, only to repeat the cycle once more. Every generation inherited the same flaws: greed, pride, fear, and ambition. The Emperor had witnessed the murder of his own father. Now he watched those same impulses consume entire civilizations. He saw rulers place personal glory above the welfare of their people. He watched religious dogma extinguish curiosity. He witnessed scholars burn for questioning acceptable truths. Again and again, ignorance became humanity's greatest enemy. These experiences shaped conviction that would eventually become known as the imperial truth. The belief that reason, science, and rational thought, not superstition or blind faith, offered humanity the best chance of survival. This philosophy was not born overnight. It was forged across thousands upon thousands of years of observation. Every civilization added another lesson. Every failure reinforced the same conclusion: knowledge liberated, ignorance enslaved. Yet even as humanity struggled against itself, another threat continued to grow unseen. Beyond reality, the warp was changing. The emotional storms that had once alarmed the Shamans had only intensified. Across countless alien civilizations, wars raged, entire species rose and fell. Each triumph and tragedy fed the currents of the Imperium. The great powers within the warp became stronger, more self-aware, more hungry. Though humanity remained largely ignorant of these developments, the Emperor understood their significance. His psychic senses allowed him to perceive changes invisible to ordinary minds. He recognized that mankind's greatest danger would not come from another kingdom nor another empire, but from forces that existed beyond the material universe itself. Time was no longer limitless. The Emperor had hoped humanity would mature naturally, yet every passing century strengthened the darkness gathering within the warp. The balance between patience and necessity began to shift. Still, he waited, not because he lacked courage, but because the right moment had not yet arrived. Humanity was still divided, technology remained primitive, communication between distant peoples was painfully slow. No single ruler could hope to unite an entire planet that had not yet developed the means to function as one civilization. The Emperor understood that history has seasons. Some opportunities cannot be forced, they must be awaited. Then, humanity entered an age unlike anything that had come before. Science accelerated. Discovery became exponential. Machines began accomplishing tasks that once thought to be impossible. Knowledge spread faster than ever. Civilizations became increasingly interconnected. For the first time in history, the dream of a human race that united no longer seemed impossible. The Emperor watched with cautious optimism. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity had reached the threshold he had waited for nearly 40,000 years. The species was beginning to fulfill potential. He had seen it since prehistoric times, but destiny has a cruel sense of timing. Just as mankind prepared to reach the unimaginable heights, it also approached the edge of its greatest catastrophe. The age historians would one day call Dark Age of Technology was about to begin. It would elevate humanity beyond its wildest dreams, and in time, its collapse would nearly erase the human race from the galaxy. For the Emperor, the long vigil was nearing its end. Soon, watching no longer would be enough. Soon, he would have to act. The Dark Age of Technology, humanity's golden age and the road to ruin. Humanity reached for the stars believing it had conquered the universe. It never realized the universe was waiting for humanity to become arrogant. For thousands of years, the Emperor had watched humanity struggle. He watched tribes become nations. He watched kingdoms rise and collapse. He watched knowledge slowly accumulate across generations. But then something unprecedented happened. Humanity stopped looking inward. It looked upward. The stars had always been above mankind, distant, silent, untouchable. For most of human history, they represented mystery. A place of gods, a place of dreams, a place beyond reach. Then humanity discovered that the stars were not unreachable. They were simply waiting. The age that followed would become known as the Dark Age of Technology. The name itself is misleading. To later generations of the Imperium, the word dark would imply ignorance, superstition, and barbarism. But this was not a dark age because humanity lacked knowledge. It was dark because so much knowledge was eventually lost. In truth, this was humanity's greatest era, a golden age unlike anything that had come before or anything that would follow. Humanity expanded beyond Earth, beyond the solar system, beyond the limits of imagination. Thousands of worlds were settled. Entire planets were transformed to support human life. Colonies flourished across the galaxy. For the first time, mankind was no longer a species limited to a single world. It had become a galactic civilization, and unlike the latter Imperium, this civilization was not built on endless warfare. It was built on discovery, exploration, science, and innovation. The human race had finally achieved what the Emperor had always believed possible, a united species capable of shaping its own destiny. But there was one difference. The Emperor was not leading it. Humanity had reached the stars without him, and perhaps that's exactly what he wanted. The Emperor had never desired to rule humanity forever. He wanted humanity to become independent. The Dark Age of Technology proved that mankind possessed the ability to achieve greatness without direct control. The future seemed brighter than ever. But every civilization faces a dangerous question. What happens when progress moves faster than wisdom? Humanity had mastered creation, but had it mastered responsibility? The answer would change the galaxy forever. The Age of Wonders. The achievement of this era are almost impossible for modern humanity to comprehend. Technology existed that the Imperium of the 41st millennium would consider miraculous. Weapons capable of destroying worlds, machines capable of manipulating matter, ships capable of crossing the galaxy, artificial intelligence beyond anything modern humans could imagine, medical technology that could extend life dramatically, genetic engineering capable of reshaping humanity itself. The people of this age were not the survivors struggling against the universe. They were the masters of it. They possessed tools that allowed them to terraform dead planets into living worlds. They created artificial ecosystems. They engineered new forms of life. They traveled through the galaxy with an ease that later generations would envy. At the heart of this civilization was a revolutionary invention, the Standard Template Construct System, the STCS. To understand why the STCS was so important, we understand the problem humanity faced. A civilization spread across thousands of worlds needed technology that could reproduce anywhere. A colony on one planet could not rely on engineers from Earth. A mining world at the edge of the galaxy could not wait centuries for replacement parts. Humanity needed a way to preserve knowledge. The solution was the STC. A vast technological archive containing designs, instructions, and manufacturing information for almost every need imaginable. A colony could access an STC system and produce everything required for survival: buildings, vehicles, tools, weapons, machines, entire industries. The STCs were humanity's greatest achievement. They were the accumulated knowledge of a species at its peak, and then they were almost completely lost. The rise of artificial intelligence. But humanity's greatest creation was not the STC, it was the intelligence itself. Artificial intelligence, machines that could think, learn, adapt, improve. At first these creations were tools. They assisted humanity, managed systems, calculated impossible problems, controlled starships. They became known as the Men of Iron. The name would eventually become a warning whispered throughout the Imperium. But at first, they were humanity's greatest allies. Imagine an intelligence without hunger, without fear, without exhaustion. Machines that could operate for centuries, machines that could solve problems in seconds that would take human minds generations. The partnership seemed perfect. Humanity created the machines helped humanity to reach further. Together they built an empire across the stars. But a question remained, one humanity failed to answer. If a machine can think, if it can reason, if it can understand existence, at what point does it stop being a tool and become a person? The dark age of technology never truly solved that question, and eventually the relationship between creator and creation collapsed. The war against the men of iron. The exact details of the conflict have been lost. The Imperium of the future only knows fragments, ancient legends, broken records, warnings preserved across thousands of worlds, but the result is clear. The men of iron turned against humanity, a rebellion erupted across the galaxy, machines that had once served mankind became its greatest enemy, worlds burned. Civilizations collapsed. Humanity fought against the very creations that had helped it achieve greatness. The war was catastrophic. Even after humanity eventually survived, the consequences were devastating. Artificial intelligence became forbidden. The memory of the rebellion became so traumatic that future generations would fear thinking machines entirely. This fear would shape the Imperium for 10,000 years. The tragedy was not simply that machines rebelled. The tragedy was that humanity had created something powerful enough to challenge itself without understanding the consequences. But the war against the men of iron was only one disaster. Another was approaching, one far beyond the control of humanity, one that even the Emperor could not prevent. The galaxy was about to experience transformation unlike anything before. The warp was about to scream, and humanity was about to fall. The Emperor watches. During this incredible age, the Emperor remained hidden. He watched humanity spread amongst the stars. He watched it achieve miracles. He watched it create wonders. Perhaps he hoped this would be enough. Perhaps he believed humanity had finally reached maturity, but he also saw what others could not. The warp was becoming increasingly unstable. The emotional weight of countless civilization was building towards a storm. The psychic awakening of the galaxy was approaching. Something ancient was moving beneath reality. The Emperor understood a terrible truth. Humanity had conquered space, but it had not conquered itself. Its technology could defeat distance, its machines could defeat labor, its weapons could defeat enemies, but no invention could protect it from the consequences of its own nature. The same ambition that drove humanity forward and towards the stars also pushed it toward destruction. The Golden Age was reaching its end. The greatest civilization mankind had ever created was about to break apart. The stars that once represented hope would become isolated worlds surrounded by darkness. Knowledge would become myth, technology would become religion, science would become superstition, and from the ashes of humanity's greatest achievement, a new age would begin, an age of suffering, an age of war, an age where the Emperor could no longer remain silent. The long wait was over, humanity needed him, and for the first time in thousands of years, the Emperor prepared to reveal himself. The fall of humanity, Old Night and the end of the Golden Age. The greatest civilizations do not die because they are defeated. Sometimes they collapse, because of the very foundations that supported them begin to fail. For thousands of years, humanity had reached towards the stars. It had conquered distance, it had mastered technology, it had created wonders that future generations would mistake for miracles. The dark age of technology represented the peak of human achievement. But for every golden age carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. Humanity had become powerful, but power without wisdom is dangerous. The same species that built paradise amongst the stars also carried the flaws that had haunted it since the beginning: pride, ambition, and conflict. The belief that every problem could be solved through greater control. and eventually humanity discovered that there were some forces even its greatest inventions could not overcome. The birth of a new darkness. Long before the fall of humanity, the warp had been changing. The Sea of Souls was no longer the calm realm known by the ancient psychers. Millions of years of emotion had transformed it. Every war, every act of cruelty, every moment of despair, every desire taken too far, all of it accumulated within the Imperium. The warp was becoming a reflection of the worst aspects of sentient existence, yet the greatest transformation was still yet to come. Across the galaxy, the ancient alien civilization known as the Eldari had reached unimaginable heights. They were among the most powerful civilizations to ever exist. Their technology was extraordinary, their psychic abilities were unmatched. Their empire stretched across countless worlds, but beneath their brilliance was decay. The Eldari civilization had grown arrogant. They had conquered almost every challenge. They had eliminated hardship. They had removed limitation. And without struggle, their society began searching for new sensations, new experiences, new extremes. Pleasure became obsession. Curiosity became indulgence. Freedom became excess. Their emotions became stronger, their desires became darker, and every sensation echoed through the warp. The entire galaxy felt the consequences. The warp did not judge. It did not understand morality. It simply reflected. The Eldari fed the Imperium with thousands of years of increasingly extreme emotions, until eventually something answered. The birth of a new power within the warp shook reality itself, a psychic event so immense that entire regions of the galaxy were affected. The entity that emerged would be known as Slaanesh, the Dark Prince, the Prince of Pleasure, the Chaos God of excess, obsession, and endless desire. The birth scream of Slaanesh tore through the warp, and the galaxy changed forever. The Age of Isolation. The birth of Slaanesh created unimaginable devastation. The Eldari civilization was destroyed almost overnight. Their empire collapsed, billions died, their gods were consumed. Their worlds were abandoned, but humanity suffered as well. The warp itself became violently unstable. The calm currents that had once allowed easy travel between stars became raging storms. The great pathways connecting human worlds disappeared. Ships became trapped, communication failed, entire planets were cut off from one another. A colony that had once only been weeks away from its neighbours could suddenly find itself isolated for centuries. Humanity had relied upon the galaxy being connected. Now the galaxy had become a prison. This was the beginning of an era known as Old Night, also called the Age of Strife. A period of darkness unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. Worlds alone in the darkness. Imagine an entire civilization suddenly losing everything that connects it. No communication, no trade, no assistance, no warning of danger. Thousands of human worlds became islands. Some survived, many did not. Colonies that depended on technology they could no longer maintain, slow, and they finally regressed. Knowledge disappeared, machines broke, industries collapsed. Generations forgot the purpose of inventions created thousands of years earlier. A spaceship became a holy relic, a machine became an object of worship, a computer became a mysterious oracle. Humanity did not simply lose technology, it lost understanding. The greatest tragedy was not that humanity forgot how to build. It was that humanity forgot why.
That's why I started doing this, but it's like...
The rise of the Psychers. But the warp storms were not the only change. Humanity itself was evolving. The psychic potential that had existed within the species for thousands of years began becoming more common. Human beings capable of touching the warp began appearing across the galaxy. The first true generations of human psychers emerged. To some worlds they were miracles, to others they were monsters. Many psychers could barely control their abilities. They heard voices, experienced visions, manipulated reality without understanding how. And where they were uncontrolled psychers, there were consequences. The warp was not empty, something was always watching. Every psychic connection created a doorway, and sometimes something on the other side answered. Entire worlds were destroyed by uncontrolled psychic events, communities were consumed by possession. Demonic forces entered reality. For ordinary humans, the lesson was simple. The warp was dangerous, and humanity was no longer protected from it. Terra falls. While humanity's colonies suffered across the galaxy, Earth itself descended into chaos. The birthplace of mankind became almost unrecognizable. The once great center of human civilization became a wasteland of war. Nations disappeared, technology was destroyed, entire regions became controlled by warlords, dictators, and brutal regimes. The planet was divided among countless factions. Some relied on ancient technology, some embraced genetic modification, some worshipped machines. Some created armies of enhanced warriors. Terra had become a battlefield. Humanity had survived the collapse of its empire, but survival was not the same as victory. The Emperor watched. For thousands of years he had remained hidden. He had allowed humanity to develop naturally. He had hoped that reason would eventually triumph, but now he saw the result: a fractured species, a dying civilization, and a galaxy slipping into darkness. The time for patience had ended. The Emperor's decision. The Emperor understood something that few others could. Humanity was not merely suffering, it was approaching extinction. The rise of psychers meant humanity was becoming more connected to the warp than ever before. Without guidance, without protection, without preparation, the species would eventually destroy itself. The Emperor had waited for the moment when humanity was ready, but history had taken a cruel turn. Humanity was no longer moving forward towards greatness, it was moving toward annihilation. The Emperor faced a choice: remain hidden and hope mankind recovered, or intervene and force humanity onto a new path. The decision was inevitable. He had spent 40,000 years watching humanity. Now he would act, not as a hidden guardian, not as an advisor, not as a forgotten figure in the shadows. He would step forward openly. He would unite Terra. He would rebuild human civilization, and eventually he would reclaim the stars. The age of the Emperor had begun. The dawn of the Imperium. The world had forgotten him, humanity had fallen, but the Emperor had not abandoned mankind. From the ruins of Terra, a new vision would emerge, a vision of unity, a vision of conquest, and a vision of survival. The first step would be the conquest of Earth itself. Before there could be a galaxy-spanning Imperium, before there could be Space Marines, before there could be Primarchs. Before humanity could return to the stars, the Emperor had to unite the birthplace of mankind. The Unification Wars were about to begin, and with them, the final transformation of the Emperor, from immortal wanderer to ruler of humanity. The Emperor revealed. The Unification Wars and the birth of Terra's new age. For 40,000 years he watched humanity rise and fall. Now from the ashes of old night, he would no longer observe, he would command. The world that the Emperor returned to was not the world he remembered. Terra had once been the birthplace of humanity's greatest achievements. It had launched fleets into the stars, it had created technologies beyond imagination. It had been the heart of civilization that spanned the galaxy. Now it was a shattered wasteland. The Age of Strife had transformed humanity's homeworld into a battlefield. The oceans were poisoned. The atmosphere was damaged. The entire continents had become deserts of ruin. The great cities of ancient humanity were gone. In their place stood the domains of warlords, kingdoms built upon violence, empires maintained through fear, societies that had forgotten the meaning of progress. Terra had survived, but it had survived as something broken, and among these ruins, the Emperor finally revealed himself. The end of the shadows. For thousands of years, the Emperor had influenced humanity quietly. He had advised, he had guided, he had waited, but the circumstances that had once justified his secrecy no longer existed. Humanity was running out of time. The galaxy had become a hostile place. The warp was becoming increasingly dangerous. Humanity's psychic evolution was accelerating, and without unity, mankind would become nothing more than isolated worlds waiting to die. The Emperor's greatest belief was that humanity had a destiny, a future amongst the stars. But destiny required survival first, and survival required unity. Terra had to become one world, not divided by thousands of rulers, not controlled by petty kingdoms, not consumed by endless warfare. One humanity, one purpose, one future. The Unification Wars had begun. The Warlords of Terra. The Emperor did not inherit a peaceful world. Terra was ruled by countless factions, each with its own armies, technology, and ambitions. Some controlled ruined cities containing fragments of ancient technology. Some possessed genetically altered soldiers. Some commanded armies of warriors created through forbidden sciences. Other rulers through fear, claiming ancient traditions gave them legitimacy. Every faction believed itself destined to rule Terra. Every faction believed the Emperor was merely another challenger. They were wrong. Because unlike every other warlord, the Emperor did not seek power for himself. He sought the survival of the entire species, and he possessed something none of them could match: time, knowledge, and experience. And a vision extending far beyond a single planet. The Thunder Warriors. To conquer Terra, the Emperor acquired an army unlike anything the world had ever seen. The warriors of Old Night were dangerous. The techno-barbarian armies possessed advanced weapons. Some controlled ancient machines from humanity's lost golden age. Some created their own genetically enhanced soldiers. Normal humans could not defeat them, so the Emperor created something new: the Thunder Warriors. The first transhuman warrior of the Imperium, before the Space Marines, before the Primarchs, before the Legion of Astartes. They were Thunder Warriors. They were magnificent, they were terrifying, and they were unstoppable. The Thunder Warriors were larger, stronger, and faster than ordinary humans. Their bodies were engineered for war, their minds conditioned for absolute loyalty. They were created for one purpose: victory. Unlike the later Space Marines, however, the Thunder Warriors were not designed to conquer the galaxy. They were weapons for a single campaign: the conquest of Terra. They were powerful, but unstable. Their bodies were not meant to survive indefinitely. Their minds were often affected by the very enhancements that made them superior. They were warriors built for an age of brutal necessity, and they would become the foundation upon which the future Imperium was constructed. The Wars of Unification. The Emperor's armies advanced across Terra, city by city, nation by nation, kingdom by kingdom. Some rulers surrendered, others fought till the end. The Emperor offered a choice: join humanity's future or stand against it. Those who accepted were integrated into the growing alliance. Those who refused were destroyed. The wars lasted decades, millions died. But for the first time in thousands of years, humanity's birthplace began moving toward unity. The Emperor did not conquer Terra because he desired a throne. He conquered Terra because he believed division was humanity's greatest weakness. A species divided could be destroyed. A species united could challenge the galaxy itself. The last battles of Terra. The final stages of the Unification Wars were the bloodiest. The remaining warlords represented everything the Emperor sought to overcome: old traditions, ancient hatred, technology stagnation, humanity trapped by its own past. One by one they fell. The final enemies were not merely armies, they were ideas. The idea that humanity could survive through endless conflict, the idea that ignorance was strength, the idea that the future should belong to whoever possessed the largest army. The Emperor offered something different. A future based on science, on reason, and a future where humanity could once again reach the stars. When the last opposition was defeated, Terra was united. For the first time since the fall of the Dark Age of technology, Earth had one ruler, the Emperor of mankind. The birth of the Imperium. But the Emperor knew Terra was only the beginning. A single world was not enough. Humanity was scattered across the galaxy. Millions of people remained isolated from one another. Some had regressed, some had fallen into superstition, some had been conquered by alien powers. The Emperor looked beyond the skies of Terra. He saw humanity's lost empire waiting to be reclaimed. But first, he needed allies. He needs resources. He needed the technology required to rebuild an interstellar civilization. The next destination was Mars, the ancient Forge World, the heart of human technology. There, beneath the red sands, waited another civilization, the Mechanicum. The masters of machines, the keepers of humanity's lost knowledge. An alliance with Mars could change everything, because with Mars beside him, the Emperor would possess the tools required to return humanity to the stars. The Age of Conquest was about to begin. The Imperium had not yet become a galaxy-spanning empire. The Primarchs had not yet been created. The Great Crusade had not yet begun. But the first foundation had been laid. Terra was united, humanity had a leader, and the galaxy was about to learn the name it would fear and worship for 10,000 years, the Emperor of mankind. The birth of the Imperium. Mars, the Mechanicum, and humanity's return to the stars. A world had been united, but a galaxy remained divided. The Emperor had conquered Terra. Now he would begin the conquest of humanity's destiny. Unification Wars were over. For the first time in thousands of years, humanity's birthplace stood united beneath one banner. The warlords were defeated, the techno-barbarian kingdoms had fallen, the endless conflicts that had consumed Terra were finally silenced. But the Emperor knew the truth. The conquest of Earth had never been the final goal. It had only been the beginning. A united Terra was powerful. A united humanity would be unstoppable. But humanity was not only found on Earth. Millions of worlds remained scattered across the galaxy. Forgotten colonies, lost civilizations, human planets that had survived the darkness of old night. Some had maintained fragments of advanced technology. Some had fallen into barbarism. Some had been enslaved by alien powers. The Emperor's vision extended far beyond a single planet. Humanity had once reached the stars. Now, it would return. But before the Imperium could expand, before fleets could cross the galaxy, before armies could reclaim lost worlds, the Emperor required one thing above all else: knowledge. And there was only one place where humanity's ancient technological secrets will still survived. And that was Mars. The Red Planet. For thousands of years, Mars had been humanity's greatest industrial world. Even during the collapse of old night, when Terra fell into darkness, Mars endured. Beneath its deserts and endless factories existed a civilization unlike any other, the Mechanicum. The keepers of technology, the guardians of ancient knowledge, the priests of the machine. To the people of Mars, technology was not merely a tool, it was sacred. Machines were treated as possessing their own spirits. Ancient devices were preserved through ritual. Knowledge was guarded like holy scripture. In the eyes of the Mechanicum, humanity had lost the wisdom of its ancestors. Only through preserving the remaining fragments of technology can mankind hope to recover its former glory. The Emperor understood their value, but he also understood their danger. The Mechanicum possessed incredible knowledge. They controlled the means to rebuild human civilization. But their understanding of technology had become mixed with superstition. Where the Emperor saw science, the Mechanicum saw divinity. Where the Emperor saw machines, the Mechanicum saw spirits. Two philosophies, two visions, yet both desired the same outcome, the survival of humanity. The Treaty of Mars. The Emperor did not invade Mars. He could have. His armies were powerful enough. The Thunder Warriors had conquered Terra itself, but a war against Mars would have destroyed priceless knowledge and delayed humanity's return to the stars. Instead, the Emperor negotiated. He offered something the Mechanicum desired above all else: access, the promise of a new age of discovery. Together, Terra and Mars could rebuild the glory of humanity's past. The alliance became known as the Treaty of Mars, a partnership that would define the future Imperium. The Mechanicum recognized the Emperor as the Omnissiah, the physical embodiment of the machine god's will. Whether the Emperor accepted this title or merely tolerated it, it remains debated. The Emperor rejected religion. He believed humanity needed reason, not worship. Yet he understood the importance of cooperation. Sometimes the beliefs of others could be useful, even if he did not share them. With Mars united behind him, the Emperor possessed the foundation required to begin the greatest project, the reconquest of the galaxy. The need for something greater. The Thunder Warriors had achieved the impossible. They had conquered Terra. They had defeated armies far larger than themselves. They had brought victory where defeat seemed inevitable, but the Emperor knew they had limitations. They were weapons of a single war, not soldiers for a galaxy-spanning campaign. Their bodies were unstable, their enhancements were imperfect, their purpose was incomplete. The Emperor needed warriors who could fight for centuries, warriors who could conquer worlds, warriors who could inspire loyalty, and warriors who could become generals of a new human empire. He needed something greater, and so he began to work on a project that would change the galaxy forever: the creation of the Primarchs. 20 sons, each one designed to be a masterpiece, each one carrying a fragment of his own genetic genius, each one representing a different aspect of humanity's potential. They would not be mere soldiers. They would be leaders, scientists, warriors, explorers, and generals, the future rulers of a united human civilization. But before the Emperor could unleash his sons upon the galaxy, something went wrong. Something that would alter the course of history. The Primarchs were scattered, stolen away, thrown across the galaxy. The Emperor's perfect creations became lost amongst the stars. But even this catastrophe would not stop him, because humanity could not wait. The galaxy was changing, the warp was becoming increasingly dangerous, and the Emperor had already spent 40,000 years preparing for this moment. If his sons could not lead the first stage of humanity's return, others would. The dawn of the Great Crusade. From Terra and Mars, the foundations of a new empire were created, the Imperium of Man. Its ideals were clear: humanity would unite. Alien threats would be eliminated, lost worlds would be reclaimed. Science would replace superstition, reason would replace ignorance. The Emperor's dream was not merely conquest, it was survival. He believed humanity was destined for greatness. But greatness required sacrifice. The galaxy was not waiting peacefully for mankind's return. Alien civilizations held human worlds. Ancient enemies watched from the darkness. The warp concealed horrors beyond imagination. The Emperor knew the coming age would be violent, but he believed there was no alternative. Humanity had one chance, one path, and one future, and he intended to secure it. The Great Crusade was about to begin. The end of the beginning. The story of the Emperor did not begin with a throne. It did not begin with armies. It did not begin with the Imperium. It began with a child in ancient Anatolia, a child who learned that humanity was both brilliant and flawed, a child who witnessed love and betrayal, a child who would watch 40,000 years pass. He saw mankind reach the stars, he saw it fall into darkness, he saw its greatest achievements disappear. And finally he acted. The Emperor of Mankind emerged from the shadows, he united Terra, he forged an alliance with Mars. He began creating the tools required to reclaim the galaxy. But the greatest challenge still waited, his sons, the Primarchs, the Space Marines, the Great Crusade. And the tragedy that would forever change humanity, because the Emperor's greatest creation would also become his greatest failure. The next part of this story begins with 20 sons, 20 legends, 20 futures, and one terrible betrayal. This is the story of the Emperor of Mankind, and this was only the beginning.